is that people who speak more than one language show slow effects of aging on the brain. So if you need a reason to study a foreign language, the fact that it can slow dementia and Alzheimer's and keep our brains more flexible and juicy as we age is a good thing. The other thing is, this is recent research that shows that speaking another language can increase your ability to think rationally. And they're very specific in what they mean by this. They mean if you're talking about a problem in your own language, emotion has a tendency to take over. But if you talk about a problem in your second language, right, in a language that is not your first, because of that switch to the other language, you have to be a little bit more intentional in your thought and expression. And what happens is you end up thinking more rationally about the problem. So it can help you kind of pull back emotionally from the situation and think about it with your rational brain. So it can make you smarter. We're going to zip through this so that we get to the good job stuff. Language learning and speaking also improves your employment possibilities. Above all, language is a tool, right? It's a tool like any of the other skills that you're developing. The ability to code, right? The ability to analyze data science, the ability to do all sorts of other things. Language is a tool like that, right? And we use it, and we can connect it to other things that we're doing in our life. One of the young women in this group asked, do you need it for studying science? If I want to be a scientist, if I want to be a doctor. You don't need it. We know plenty of doctors who don't speak a foreign language. But by adding language, right, it's another tool that you have in your toolbox that you can then apply to different kinds of work situations, right? You have more opportunities because you can do that job, whatever that science job is, in different contexts, in Erie, in Pennsylvania, all over the world. I will point out that the reason language is a particularly useful tool is that sometimes we have the sense that, well, I live in the United States, the nearest foreign country, we'd have to drive 2 hours to get to Canada, we'd have to drive a bazillion and a half to get to Mexico. Do we really need to study a foreign language? The reality is that in the United States, there are between 350 and 430 languages spoken. Right? I think if we sat and tried to count languages we know, we'd probably get up to 33. But somehow there's 430 languages being spoken in the US. So the United States is a multilingual society. And your ability to access another increase your ability to interact with those people professionally. In the US, those are the 5, I don't know if you can see the slides, those are the 5 most spoken languages in the US, obviously English, Spanish, Chinese, Tagalog, right, which is from the Philippines, and Vietnamese. And of course, here you have the opportunity to get really good in Spanish, to add that to your toolbox. When we're looking at Erie in particular, Erie is what we call a welcoming city. And that means that it has fulfilled certain criteria to be recognized as a place that welcomes refugees, immigrants, and people we call new Americans. And that means that there are job opportunities in Erie connected to working with those populations. And those populations generally, when they first arrive, speak another language. These are the languages that are most spoken in Erie after English. Spanish, Nepali, people who are from Nepal, Arabic, Russian, Chinese, and then I added Russian again. You can ignore the second Russian. Obviously, another reason to study foreign languages or world languages is to increase your cultural understanding. You watch the news, and if you know something about another language and other cultures, the news makes more sense. It also increases tolerance, which is important in the workplace, right? The ability to work with different kinds of people. You're not going to get to choose all the time the people that you're selling a product to, the people whose houses or work you're going into, to give them a service. And so being tolerant, open-minded, and having cultural understanding is really important. And of course, to be a global citizen. We'll come back to this later. So language is a tool for work. We see that there is the potential for increasing your earnings if you have the skill in another language. So if you are going out to be an accountant, a lawyer, you're going to sell insurance, right? You're going to work in any field, and you have the ability to speak a foreign language. Some studies indicate that can lead to a 5 to 20% increase in your pay, depending obviously on the job and where you are. Some of the places or some of the kinds of roles that people have in Erie where they have been asked if they can speak another language, and that's like an extra little tick on the employment box, are in customer service. Erie Insurance has some bilingual people who are working with their people who buy insurance, car insurance, house insurance, who need help in Spanish. Human service agencies. Any human service agency in Erie would need and love to have staff that can speak Spanish. People who are working with children, in education, with our new American populations, healthcare, etc. There is presently a job out there on when you go on all the little apps for job searching in Erie for bilingual tax preparers, right? Because if you're somebody who doesn't speak English and you're trying to navigate the IRS, maybe you need some help. And it doesn't matter what your area is that you're looking at, in every single area, adding a language still makes you more useful. So what this means is, yes, I would love it if you all came to where I work and you all got a 4-year degree in Spanish. That's not necessary, right, for the vast majority of us. What I'm saying is that you have this wonderful opportunity here at General McLean to study 4 years, some of you are 2 years, 3 years, 4 years of a language that will give you a really strong foundation that then you can go apply it to your work, whether or not you go to college, whether or not you study language in college. You can use that tool. I wanted to use Chris Irwin as an example of something interesting because to prove the point that no matter what job you have, language makes it more interesting and potentially more profitable. So Chris came to Mercyhurst. He's from a little town, Franklin, Pennsylvania, and he studied Spanish education. He was going to be a Spanish teacher. And he went out and he taught Spanish for a couple of years and was good at it and liked it. But then he saw that there was this program at Slippery Rock University in safety and environmental management. And he went and he did it. And because of his Spanish skills and because he had the degree in safety, which I didn't need, frankly, I have to admit, I did not know was a thing, he became someone who goes out and inspects mines for their safety for the workers. And he was sent to Colorado and to all over the place because many of the workers and the managers of those mines are Hispanic and speak Spanish. And he was able to interact with the workers. So he has made this whole career combining his cultural and linguistic knowledge with this other training he got. And, of course, you can see him in the green in Machu Picchu in Peru, having a wonderful life, just married a woman from Colombia. And you know what? Went back to Franklin to live, but works for this company. Because, as we know, you don't actually have to go live in Colombia to have an international life. You can do it in Franklin, right? Because a lot of our work lets us travel now or work remotely. So Michaela is somebody who was very interested in the area of public health. And so she was a public health major and a Spanish minor. And after she graduated, she went to the Dominican Republic and worked at an orphanage, did a year of service, stayed for a second year, came back to the U.S., did a master's degree, and she's combined language with public health. And if you're going to do anything with the public, right, social work, psychology, public health, anything that is helping the United States figure out its social problems, learning a foreign language would be an incredible benefit. And then we have people who, you know, Ethan's wanted to work in hospitality, so he wanted to work for restaurants and hotels. And his ability in French is helping him now. He's a sales manager, and that is a sales manager position for hospitality equipment. And he travels the world, right? And interacts with people all over the world. And French is an enormous benefit to him. And then we have Blair, who is political science. Some of you might be interested in politics. And she was a political science major. She did Spanish as well. She went off and she did a study abroad experience in Mexico and then got a master's degree and worked for the Kuwait consulate. Now, if you know where Kuwait is, they're not speaking Spanish, right? So this is a really interesting phenomenon too. We're going to look at a couple of these people who studied a particular language, but got a job dealing with another culture and another language because their employer realized that if they could learn and use Spanish effectively, they could be trained to learn and use another language effectively. Or that they had the disposition, the open-mindedness, the tolerance, the world curiosity, that they could, why not, work for Kuwait, right? And so it didn't matter. She wasn't limiting herself by being a Spanish minor. I mean, when you take a look at, oh my gosh, there's 300, 400 languages spoken in the US, and I can only maybe add one. And even then, maybe you've studied it for a couple of years and it still feels hard to you. The point is that just the act of studying it and putting that on your resume and telling someone that you have that interest or basic skill, that's the kind of thing that gets you in the door, whether or not the job has to do with Spanish. I want to take a minute to talk to people who are interested in the military. I don't know, I know some of you might take a year off before you go to college, or might not be interested in college at all. All of this still applies to you, and if you're interested in a military career, the military is highly interested in people who can study or who can speak a second language. And there are two kind of paths that the military generally uses for foreign language expertise. One is called a human intelligence collector. So one of the things we saw when the United States entered into the conflict in Iraq all those years ago is that we were sending our military into places and we didn't have interpreters. We didn't know what was happening on the ground because we didn't have enough language resources. And so that's something that the military, always cares about. But to be able to have people on the ground who can go into situations, talk, and gather intelligence, right? Gather information on the ground, in person, in that foreign language, right? And not have to depend on an interpreter. Because we know we don't want, to get really good intel, you probably don't want to have to rely on somebody else filtering it for you, right? So that's one thing that you can do in the military. The other thing I think is really cool is when you go into the military, you take a series of tests. And one thing you can test for is to be a cryptological linguist. In other words, they'll test your linguistic capabilities. And if you're really pretty gifted in that area, they'll send you off to learn how to decode code, right? So by being a cryptological linguist, it's like you learn how language works, not connected to Spanish or French or Japanese, but about how the human mind produces language so that you can figure out codes that people might be using to send messages in. I think that's cool. I had a friend who did this in college. I was like, what? If you're interested in the military and college, some of you know about ROTC. Do you have ROTC in General Claim? No? Okay. If you go to college, you can do ROTC. It's kind of like a combination. It's like joining the military kind of in an informal sense while you're doing college. And there's all sorts of academic expectations for military science. But one of the cool things is that ROTC will pay you to study language. It's called a foreign language proficiency bonus. So if you're studying languages like Chinese, Russian, or Arabic, and that's not the full list, that's just some that might be more readily available in our area, you can get up to $3,000 a year for studying that. So they pay you per course you're taking. So that's a really cool benefit if you're looking for extra money. And of course, it's going to support you when you end up getting into the military as well. This is a young woman who studied language at Mercyhurst. She also studied intelligence studies, and she was doing ROTC, and now she's a commissioned officer in the Army. So language, military service, they go together. So if you are thinking about going to college, of course, you can be one of those people, right, that are near and dear to our hearts, who go, I'm going to major in a language, right? I'm going to go get a bachelor's degree in this language. And maybe you get it in language or literature, language and literature. Maybe you love reading and writing. Maybe you're going to become a language teacher, like your wonderful teachers here, right, who have inspired you. You're going to be, I'm going to come back to General McLean and steal their job. International business, maybe, or international relations. Those are kind of some of the majors that people tend to do with language. Or you might do a minor. You might take a major in something else and do a minor, which might be 6 or 8 courses. I want to put a plug in for the minor, whether or not it's a language minor. When you go to college and you're doing a major, pick a minor, because the minor can help hone your career path, right? So maybe you want to be a psych major, but you decide you're going to do a data science minor. That is the kind of thing that helps point you in your direction about what you're going to do with your life, right? And it gives you added skills to put on a resume. So you can do a major, you can do a minor. A lot of times you pick your language and you're going to take courses in linguistics, right? Studying languages, how they work, in culture, speaking, etc. So here's a young woman. She was a French major, right? She got a bachelor's degree in French. And then after she graduated, she went off to the Peace Corps. And the Peace Corps is a federal program sponsored by the U.S. government, and it puts talented young people, and not only young people, you can apply for whenever, but most of the time it's people right out of college, and they go for 2 years, and they live and work in a developing nation, okay? So like in her case, she was in Cameroon. You might end up, in Mexico, in Brazil. We've had students in Ukraine. Anyhow, so she did that for 2 years, and then she got hired by the U.S. government in the Peace Corps program. So she lives and works in Washington, D.C. So she's somebody who's like, I'm just going to be a French major. Adam just was a Spanish major, and he kind of really only wanted to teach skiing. Right? That was his life. He was like, I want to be a ski instructor. He was from Vermont. Okay. So he did Spanish because he loved it, and then he skied for a while, and then all of a sudden he writes me and he's ended up managing a clinic in Panama for a nonprofit medical organization, right? And he was not hired because of his skiing skills, right? He was hired because he had a degree and he could speak Spanish and interact with people. And clearly, he liked dogs. Elena was a Spanish major, right? She went off and got a master's degree, but Elena now has been living and working in Spain for the past 10 years. So we have a lot of students that when they decide to study a language, they're realizing that they don't have to look at their local geographic area for a job, and they live and work overseas. So we have several students who are living in Spain. We have a student who's in Milan. We've had students in Japan and in Korea and other places, because having that language skill means that you can take whatever your work passion is, and you can do it in many other places in the world. One of the things, obviously, is language teaching as a path, and you'd have to study your language area, and then you also take education courses, and you do student teaching. We've had a couple student teachers here with your faculty. So language teaching is an area. And that's what Tracy Horanek studied. She studied French education. And then she studied abroad, and then she loved France. So she stayed there. She got a master's degree. She loved it. So she got a PhD. And she loved it. And then she stayed and taught at universities in France. So, that's the wonderful path she was on. She's back in the U.S. right now. You can also, perhaps if you are interested in teaching, be an English as a second language teacher. There are a lot of children in our county who need help because they come in with their parents, right? They're new immigrants, and they don't speak English well enough to be entered into, to be doing all their classes with all their friends. So this is a growing field. This is a field where we need more and more people. So if you like teaching, if you like language, but maybe you don't want to be a Spanish teacher or a French teacher, that's not really what I want to do. you can be an English teacher, but focus it on teaching English as a second language. And that's what Alexandra Kleckner does. She's the head of Harbor Creek School District's TESOL program, or ESL program. And you can help children that way. Many of you might be thinking about careers in business. Obviously, international business is like a traditional path you could take, but you can also just do a business degree, accounting, marketing, management, economics, finance, and add a minor in Spanish or a concentration of courses in French or Arabic or Russian or whatever other language you're interested in. International business would have you do all those business areas and then include some international components. So this is an example, kind of like we talked about with one of our other people. Sarah Jakes was an accounting major and a Spanish minor. And right out of college, she got hired by Bayer. You know, I don't know if you know about Bayer Aspirin, B-A-Y-E-R, but it's a medical company, right? And she got hired to work in their German office. And of course, she knew no German. But they hired her because she had been a Spanish minor. And they hired her, and they gave her an intensive German tutor who worked with her for X number of weeks at her home to learn German, right, while they were paying her. And then they sent her over to Germany, and she was an accountant in Germany for quite a long time. Then her next posting after that, I think she was over there for about 8 years, was Puerto Rico, because she also had the Spanish, right? So that's the interesting thing, is that having that extra cultural and language piece, other people see it, right? And they think that, and they can find ways to use it. Kayla Frost, she did a double major in international business and Spanish, studied abroad in Spain, and did a master's degree in Canada, is now working in Vancouver, Canada. I just want to point out really quickly, if you go to college, there are other things called area studies. You might be someone who's much more interested in history, religion, anthropology, political science. And area studies are these little majors or minors that you can have that combine language study with the study of a particular area. So maybe you want to do it in Latin American studies, or maybe you want to do it in European studies. University of Pittsburgh is a wonderful university, and it has a plethora of area studies programs that are, they're amazing. And so you can go and study, you know, German history, German language, something about the European Union, right? Or whatever area you're interested in. So area studies is interesting. Joellen Marsh was a graduate of ours. She did Arabic studies. That was so she studied Arabic language, but also Islam and the history of the modern Middle East, etc. And now she works at a not-for-profit in Pittsburgh, working with people who speak Arabic. We already talked about TESOL. I just love this picture. This was Matt Yoke just having a lovely time making selfies of himself when he was studying abroad in Oman. And he was an intelligence studies major, Arabic minor, also studied Chinese, and now is working in Dubai. But I just want to point out, guys, shameless plug for study abroad. If you have the opportunity when you're in college, or even if you're not going to college, to study abroad or to go abroad, to travel abroad, those are also things that are incredibly important, right? And if you are studying a language, studying abroad is the thing that really moves you up a level, right? Because you're immersed in it, you make friends, you speak it all the time. It's not just a classroom experience. I will zip through these. These are just things you can do. So our alums, people who leave college, we have, just to review, teaching opportunities in the US and abroad, working for the government in any aspect of government work. We have someone who's Spanish major who's running the Social Security office in Jamestown, New York, right? Hired just with those credentials of being a Spanish major. Go figure. Non-governmental organizations, so any not-for-profit that you can think of. Human services, right? Working in anything that's helping our society. And law school is another really popular destination for people who have a language or culture Before I close, and if we have time for questions, that would be great, but before I close, I want to say, I think it's totally appropriate. It's what you should be doing is exploring and thinking about work. What am I going to do? What will my career be? Your work is an important part of your life, right? I mean, that's a lot of hours out of your day, a lot of years out of your life, and you want to make sure that work is meaningful to you, that it's something that you care about, that you can find a way to understand its usefulness to other people and to yourself. So your focus on work is really important. It's not just like a job, right? It should be the way you contribute, that you should feel that, right? Like you're contributing to some larger thing. But you also have lives. And I want to say that studying language, speaking language, being interested in these things, it's not just about, is it going to help me get a job? It's about life, right? For me, language study I'm not a very adventurous person. I love to sit at home with my cup of tea and my book. Language gave me adventure, right? It got me out of my home, out of Erie, where I was born and raised, right? It gave me really big experiences. Language study is about exploring. Not just exploring, maybe you're like, I don't want to climb mountains in Peru. You don't have to, right? But exploring, for me, it's exploring the literature and the culture of countries I care about. And of course, it opens you up to international people here in our community, right? People that come from other places because we're a little bit more interested in them. Studying language is about forming friendships, relationships with other people, understanding the people in our community, and that community is a world community, right? What we do in the United States affects people all over the world, and caring about it is important. It's about knowing more stuff. We all should know more stuff. And really, for me, it's all been about joy. And I hope that your lives are full of joy and full of passion and adventure and exploration. And if language helps you get there, then I hope you explore it too. So thank you.
Edwards did a really good job connecting language study to the real world, to each one of you in some kind of way. So give her another round of applause for coming in on her day off. And if you notice, the last photo that she showed was one of my student teachers. If you notice my color poster in the background, that was in my classroom. Anyone have any questions for her while she's here? Talk about Mercyhurst or specific things that you heard about in the presentation? No? Okay.
She's the one, your teacher's the one who lives in Milan now. Isn't that so cool?
It is, yeah.
No questions, no questions.
All right. Well, your teachers know you're arriving late to class. You can just head there right away. No pit stops.